everybody, what's up? I am going to do a review of this bioenergetic scan along with HTMA, and it's in a toddler. So this is a little different than the adults that I work with, but as you will be able to see, the amount of information that we get from this test is going to set this amazing child up for life. They have been struggling with eczema, chronic gut issues, and other things related to just having chronic skin issues like poor sleep, nervous system dysregulation, cranky. And so we really want to nip this in the bud before we get any older and doctors start to want to say, here's some steroids, rub this steroid cream on. We want to make sure that obviously the immune system and the nervous system and the endocrine system is not dampened and hindered by steroids. If you guys know my story, I went through topical steroid withdrawal after having mast cell activation from taking oral prednisone. And it was the absolute worst hell. And children and babies, they develop topical steroid withdrawal much quicker than adults usually. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So just looking at, this is the bioenergetic scan. It's going to test for all of the different stressed areas in these systems. You can see here the most stressed areas are the allergy points. So that's going to be part of this immune system stress. Not surprised since she's dealing with eczema, because this kind of represents having more sensitivities. It could be related to mast cell degranulation, histamine issues. In her case, definitely related to the digestive system, because you can see they're almost like the exact same percentage. And you can see in the next section, energetic sensitivities, that she is resonating with tons and tons of sensitivities. So we know as the gut lining breaks down and becomes leaky, that food, undigested food particles are going to get through, even if she was still breastfeeding, which she's not at this moment. But the things that mom would have been eating, those antibodies can get produced from the food that even mom is eating. So why is her gut so stressed? Well, she did have an early rounds of antibiotics in childhood, which kind of set up this gut microbiome to be imbalanced. When we take antibiotics, especially for the length of time that this child did, you're going to be more predisposed to fungal overgrowth because you're killing off that good bacteria and it needs to be in a balance. So as we see in the energetic toxins section, we have two bacteria that can be imbalanced in the gut. Clostridium, this is a big one. You may know it as C. diff. This is not that species, which would be C. difficile. But this whole category of Clostridium can oftentimes be in the gut. It's very common exposure. Strep is another really common bacteria that can also be elevated in the gut, as well as in other areas of the body. So why are we continuing to have these gut imbalances? So I'm gonna go over to the HTMA now, so you guys can see. So here we're looking at the sodium to potassium ratio, and it is inverted, which means sodium is low and potassium is high. We want it to be the other way around. We want sodium to be higher than potassium. And this inversion is a good recipe for protein catabolism, or breaking down of tissue, which includes the gut. The more skewed this ratio is, which this is a pretty skewed ratio, we're going to be more predisposed to gut infections. So that could be a big reason why. And I'm going to go back over to the scan. All right. And then we're going to look at liver gallbladder. So liver's coming up as stress. This can oftentimes play a really big role with skin issues as well, because the liver breaks down fat-soluble toxins, which includes metals, well, some metals, mold, for sure, mold, including like the fungal overgrowth in our own system, as well as chemicals. And so all of those can impact the liver in some way, and then the liver has to deal with them and make them water soluble so we can move them out. Quite a few toxins are resonating for the liver stress. pesticides and herbicides, which can also contain other impactful chemicals and metals too, like arsenic is in pesticides. And then she's resonating with two metals, samarium and rubidium, which can be exposures from like pollution and industrial areas. The molds, we've got bipolaris and aspergillus, which are very common molds. Aspergillus would be the big one here. You want to make sure that you don't have aspergillus in your home because it can make people sick. And they do test for it on the ERMI scan as well as the HTMA because it is one of the molds that could make people sick. And molds, of course, is a big, big liver stressor because our liver has to process it, but there's well documentation of molds actually damaging the liver amongst other organs, as well as playing a really big role with fungal overgrowth in the gut. On top of that, looking at the HTMA, so let's bounce around again. We're looking at heavy metals, and here we have aluminum is really, really elevated. So aluminum is also a heavy metal that can impact a lot of different areas, as well as mercury is elevated. Arsenic, which again is in that pesticide and herbicide, so that kind of matches up with the scan, is also elevated. We've also got iron that's elevated. So this could mean that she's dealing with iron overload, which you can also tell by the low copper. This is really, really low for copper. Optimal is 2.2. Whenever we see copper this low, it typically can indicate copper biounavailability, which would mean that copper is building up in the liver or in the brain. And when copper is biounavailable, then we're not going to be able to metabolize iron. So then we could struggle possibly with iron overload, which could mean iron's getting built up in the tissues as well. Also, when it comes to iron, iron is also an amigo. They call it the three amigos with aluminum and with this manganese, which you'll see is also really off the charts. So when one is high, typically they all are because they're synergists of each other. So why is manganese high? Well, we want to rule out like water exposures. We also want to rule out I would say obviously the aluminum and the iron might be impacting it as well. Pesticides and herbicides could also be a big driver for manganese as well. And then, so back to the copper. So when somebody has this biounavailable copper, which we're going to go back to the scan now, seeing that the scan also showed that copper is low. When someone has biounavailable copper, we're going to have a much harder time fighting off infections, which is going to include fungal overgrowth, parasitic overgrowth, and bacterial overgrowth. So this is another big flag. Calcium's also coming up as low in the mineral section for bioenergetics, and it was low on HTMA. Calcium, B12, zinc, and iron are often difficult to absorb when you have a lot of gut stress like that. And we see low hydrochloric acid, which is really important for activating things like iron. So again, lots of gut stress could impact absorption, the use of these nutrients, but then also we've got other nutrients that could be imbalanced that are impacting others. So every single mineral, vitamin, amino acid, they all have synergists and antagonists. For example, lysine is a calcium synergist. So we have low calcium, low lysine. If we improve the lysine, calcium can improve and get higher as well. You can see everything's heavily connected. It's really, really cool. And then just looking at the hormones, cholecystokinin is a big one for that gut stress because it's produced in the small intestine. And then it also plays a role with the release of bile, which is how we're dumping those fat-soluble toxins out. And then you'll see aldosterone. This is really important for regulating sodium and potassium. And so we saw on HTMA, sodium and potassium was really, the inversion of the ratio was occurring. So as you can tell, no matter what age you are, you're going to get a lot of information from both testing. And just to see what's resonating, because she's so young, she's only a toddler, everything that's resonating on the scan is homeopathy. So it should be super gentle. They're all liquid and they're all drops. So really easy to add to water and just do one at a time. We're also going to be adding in some really specific minerals that are going to be helpful for balancing the sodium and potassium ratio and raising the calcium. Specifically, it's going to be a formula from Endomet Labs. And then also, one of the things resonating, this rehydrate homeopathy is going to help with that mineral retention. It's going to help with some of the adrenal hormones that regulate sodium and potassium, like aldosterone. So you can see everything kind of matches up and makes sense. You can use this to help tweak your diet, to help tweak your metabolism, to understand why you have chronic infections like Lyme, to understand why you have autoimmunity. It is the most absolute best testing that I have found to help me heal from mast cell activation, eczema all over my whole body, candida overgrowth, as well as, chronic emotional trauma patterns such as heavy calcification, being very shut down, and being in functional freeze branch of the nervous system. So I hope this was helpful. Reach out to me at thehealerrevolution.com. You can also find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Amanda Panacea. You can also follow me at The Healer Revolution. And this is where you can also contact me to order some testing and hopefully get everything sorted out for whatever you're dealing with. So thank you guys so much. Have the rest of your day.